a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. The Organic Man coffee trike got its name because it started out life as a trike. In 2015, Julio would push his tricycle with a coffee making system mounted on the back and sell coffee at the local farmers markets. He used only the best organic coffee, and Julio was a man. So he became the Organic Man with a coffee trike. Now, the name sounds kind of goofy, so it was changed to Organic Man Coffee Trike. One day, he and Marta decided to put a roof over the bike and see how their business would go from there. They rented a small store on Water Street. The trike was now parked inside by the front door. The coffee-making stuff was expanded and his selection became much wider. Julio spent hours, days, weeks, months perfecting his skills at roasting beans until he had it perfect. Roasting coffee is not a skill, it's an art form. If you are a connoisseur of the roasted bean, if you respect your taste buds and only the best coffee will do, or you just want a really good cup of coffee, swing by 4501 McPherson, the Organic Man Coffee Trike, and have the best coffee in the universe. I'll bet Santa drinks a lot of coffee on December 24th, getting fired up for the big day. Why do some names make you want to laugh, while others are just confusing? The Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. It sounds as if somebody had a bunch of words they wanted to use, and they jumped at the first chance that came along. What do the folks at ATIP do? It's an unclassified but also unpublicized investigatory effort. Funded by the United States government. In other words, it means you and I are paying for it. To study unidentified flying objects or unexplained aerial phenomenon. Sounds good, but what does this mean for you and to me? Not a darn thing. Congress might, just might, get a report from these folks once in a while, but a lot of it will be behind closed doors for national security purposes. Plus, the military will only tell them what they want Congress to know. It would be kind of like your boss calls you up and says, "What project are you working on right now?" And you were to tell him, "I can't tell you, it's a secret." And your boss would go, "Oh, okay, carry on." That would be a good time to ask for a raise. The name Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program sounds really confusing, unlike Project Blue Book. Everybody knew what it was. They didn't know that it was simply a scam to make it look as if the government were looking into flying saucers, but people thought they knew what the thing was doing. Nowadays, with ATIP, They don't even say they're looking at UFOs. They keep changing the name of the thing as well. Just when you think you know what to call these folks, they're changing the name again. I don't know how many people have been put in charge of this project. They want it to be all inclusive, maybe. Maybe they want to be allowed to study everything. It's a flying object, it's up in the sky, it's under the water, it's sitting on the ground. It's only in your dreams. And they want to study it. So they're going to be all inclusive. I wonder what's going to happen when the folks at Dogue run into the folks at ATIP. There's a name you can look at and know exactly what they're all about. Department of Government Efficiency. You talk about a misnomer. There's two words that never seem to go together until now. Government efficiency. This is going to be an exciting year coming up. As Art Bell said, want to take a ride? I have received 3 letters every week for the last 2 months telling me the exact same thing. I have a stack of 18 to 20 of these letters now sitting in the kitchen. They all tell me the exact same thing. It's as if the folks at the Thrift Savings Plan don't give a hoot that they're spending our tax dollars on postage and paper. And somebody's having to send all these things out. Yeah, I know it's a computer doing it, but still, that computer could be doing a lot of other things other than mailing me this same document over and over and over. I am so looking forward to 2025 with anticipation and dread. There are going to be some things drug out of the deep, dark, secret recesses of some government agencies that's going to make people cringe. What do you mean you're doing that to hamsters? Or how does that equate as a government project? Yes, there's going to be some head scratching. Names can be confusing for a lot of reasons. Back when rock was still getting a foothold on the world, there were thousands of rock bands being formed. They would play a few songs and then dissolve into the night. Groups like Traffic, Squeeze, April Wine. Or every once in a while, one of these groups would come out with a single that went to the top of the charts, only for the band to disappear. Folks like Iron Butterfly, Buzzard Canyon. 1964, a new music band hoped to receive sponsorship from the local brewery called the Mitchells and Butlers Brewery. In order to attract possible attention, the band named themselves the M&B 5. The brewery owned several nightclubs, and the band hoped that this would draw the attention to themselves. Well, it didn't work. They received 0 funding from the brewery, and they never played at any of the nightclubs. The band's name evolved from M&B 5 to the Moody Blues. Incorporating the M&B letters, since they were stamped in great big letters on the drum, as well as a subtle reference to Duke Ellington's song, Mood Indigo. Their songwriter, Pinder, stated at the time that he was interested in how music could affect and change people's moods. The blues was also a reference to the band's set at the time, consisting mostly of rhythm and blues. M&B. I can see where the idea came from. It made sense from a financial way of looking. Name the band after a local business makes me think about a song by Dire Straits. Mention MTV in the song, and the song will get played a lot on MTV. In 1967, a bunch of musicians got together and they formed Navy Blue, which then became Ian Henderson's Bag o' Nails, followed by Candy Colored Rain. Most folks, me included, never heard of any of these bands. There were hundreds of bands running around trying to be discovered by the music industry. Kathy's going after my microphone. A couple of kids would get musical instruments and they would practice in the garage, if they had one. Thus, the name Garage Band came into being. As soon as they could play a few songs, they began looking for public exposure so they just might make it in the music world. The music industry was being run by evil overlords that had stacked the deck against anyone trying to climb the ladder of success. If you got in on the ground floor, it was through sheer hard work and luck. But if you went any higher, it was all in who you knew. Nobody knew this back then. They all thought if some record executive would just notice them and sign them to a record deal, the world would be their oyster. Musicians mostly didn't have any money, so they had to have day jobs. They used their cash to try buying their way into the music industry, buying new instruments and instruments, what the heck is that? Buying new instruments and the latest gadgets coming on the market. Y'all remember the Moog synthesizer? Everybody thought if some record executive would hear them play, they would be a natural to climb the ladder. A lot of these musicians also didn't understand how the music industry worked, so they were forced to hire people, agents and managers, who took care of all the niggly little bits like where they're going to play and how much money they're going to make. The Navy Blues Band had an agent whose job it was to find bars and nightclubs where the band could perform and hopefully get discovered. The band went on stage at several nightclubs throughout London each weekend. They would play and do their best. They would put their hearts, their souls into the music and then go back home, never to receive a call back from any of these nightclubs. Folks listened to them play, but they weren't what everybody thought was wow yet. Just some guys with guitars playing music. They had nothing for folks to remember them by. In order to get the band onto stage some more, the agent began changing their name, pretending the members were different as well. He would move names around, or he would change a letter or two. He would tell them to dress different each time they showed up and not to stand in the exact same places they did each time. That way, hopefully, the nightclub owners wouldn't realize it's the same guys, just playing slightly different music. One day, something happened that nobody expected. The Spanish Inquisition. No, 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 that's not it. They received a call back from one of the nightclubs asking for them to come back and play again. A callback? What the heck was that? They'd never had one before. The agent called Ian and said, "You're to perform at a London nightclub under the name Jethro Tull, and you're to play once more. Try to remember what songs you did." Nobody in the band was paying any attention to the name, since every time they showed up it was different. Plus, none of them could remember what music they had played or how they had performed. They had to do some head scrambling to try to come up with an idea on who the band was. Once the agent's underling Try that again. One of the agent's underlings was a history buff, and he had simply pulled the name out, thinking it couldn't hurt. Give it a try. Who would have ever thought that a flute could be a part of a rock band? There are lots of groups out there that mimic other groups, trying to capture some of their fame. This is a lousy idea. The trick is to find your own style and run with it. The Moody Blues sound like the Moody Blues. You can hear a song by Pink Floyd and you know it's Pink Floyd. A Jethro Tull sounds like Jethro Tull and nobody else. A Jethro Tull, the guy the band is named after, was born in 1674. He was an English agriculturalist from Berkshire who helped bring the British agricultural revolution to the country back in the 18th century. As for the band, how much did the name have to do with the band becoming a big deal? A lot of folks remembered it because it was unique. It was different from all the other bands trying to become recognized. Remembered by the people that had spent their money to be entertained. Jethro must be the guy with the flute. Or maybe he's the guitarist. Does he do the drums? Like the guy said on that movie, there's nobody in the band named Jethro Tull. Armageddon. If you didn't see the movie, it was okay. I liked it. There are some folks out there that will use a staged name and not the real name. They save that for their personal life. I have very little use for people that use just one name. They tend to think so highly of themselves, they forget the rest of us even exist. James Allen Hendricks was drafted into World War II. Lucille Hendricks, his wife, was 17 at the time and very pregnant. When her son was born, she named him John Allen Hendricks, November 27th, 1942. Lucille and James did not have a good relationship. When he returned from the military, Lucille had left their son John in the care of family and friends for most of the time James was away. The first thing he did upon returning from the war was change John's name to James Marshall Hendricks in honor of himself and his late brother, Leon Marshall. James and Lucille stayed together despite their differences, and they had 4 more children. They both had drinking problems and often fought while drunk. Drinking and having kids is a horrible idea. Drinking before you have kids is a horrible idea. Come to think of it, a lot of drinking is a horrible idea. Well, this couple had a very unhappy home life, and eventually they decided to stop being a family. The kids were all either off to foster homes or adopted away. John, or James, depending, grew up in several homes until his dad finally decided that he wanted to reconnect with the two boys. Living in a broken home in Seattle, James, or was it John, was offered a choice one day: army or jail. 1961. In 1961, he'd gotten sideways with the police department, a little something to do with driving a car that may or may not have been stolen. The judge banged his gavel and said, jail or army? Well, John, or was it James, enlisted in the army May 31st, 1961, and he was assigned to the 101st Airborne at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. James, or was it John, was not a model soldier, not even in the top half of the bottom half of the group. He lingered somewhere down around the bottom, just kind of circling around down there, sucking up food and upsetting other troops. He had a somewhat rebellious attitude, which really pissed off the commanding officers and the sergeants. He slept on duty a lot. He was constantly needing supervision to keep him doing whatever job he was assigned to, and he sucked at shooting. John was a habitual offender when it came to things like not being in his rack at night, missing bed call, missing roll call, missing a lot of things in the military. He was never bad enough to get thrown out, but he was not really good enough to keep. He was one of those. He decided he wanted to learn to play the guitar. He used what little spare time he had to sit in the corner of the barracks and play music, which really endeared him with the rest of his roommates who were all trying to get sleep. The army had no real reason to get rid of John, or was it James? But they had enough trouble as it was just trying to wrangle the troops that they had without paying so much attention to just one man. When James, or was it John, broke his ankle during a parachute jump, the Army decided that this was good enough reason to discharge him. They gave him an honorable discharge. Just please go away. Take your stuff and leave. So he did. Vietnam was still just a smoky haze on the horizon, and the military didn't need a lot of warm bodies yet. Once out of the military, John, or was it James, had time to really get into his guitar playing. He practiced long and hard. No more slacking. Then he moved to London, since that was the up-and-coming place at the time. In order to be his own man, John, or James, decided to change his name once more to Jimi, Jimi Hendrix. If you don't recognize that name, there's no hope. What effect did this new name have on his music? Did it have any? Would John Hendrix have become the world-changing guitarist that Jimi rose to? How about James Hendrix? I tried weighing these names against each other in my mind. Probably because I grew up listening to Jimi Hendrix, the name just kind of grabs hold and won't let go. Anytime I read about magic rituals or incantations, the one thing they all seem to agree on is you have to have a name. If you find you need to exorcise some demon, the first thing you do is discover who you're dealing with. You have to know their name, and you have to pronounce it correctly. The wording is crucial. The pronunciation is as well. By saying the wrong name, you're no longer dealing with whatever creature it is that's sitting in front of you. Bad things are about to come your way. Seeing as this works with elementals, why would us humans be any different? By changing your name, could you be changing your destiny, your direction in life, your possible outcome? Will choosing a good name lead to a good outcome? Can the wrong name derail you from what you're trying to do? When it comes to name changes, this next guy, he holds the title. I never much cared for his music. It's just not to my taste. I was fascinated, and I truly admire the man. He was the kind of person that I think everybody should have been able to sit down and talk to at least once in their lifetime. He had a very unique name, which he changed to an even more unique name. When it comes to using just the one name, this guy gets a pass. He's one of the few you mention that one name and you know exactly who you're talking about. Prince Rogers Nelson was born in Minneapolis, July 7th, 1958, the son of a jazz singer, Matty Della, and pianist and songwriter John Lewis Nelson. He was 2 months younger than me. All four of his grandparents came from Louisiana. His grand aunt was a black nationalist, Maud Lena Gordon, who established the peace movement in Ethiopia and advanced emigrating to West Africa in response to some of the nastiness going on here in the United States at the time. The white supremacist movement, which, you know, any group like that is, well, not worth knowing. Prince was named after his father's most popular stage name, Prince Rogers, which his father used while performing with Prince's mother in a jazz group called the Prince Rogers Trio. John Nelson said he named his son Prince because he wanted his son to do everything that he wanted to do. Prince was not fond of this name. He wanted people to call him Skipper instead. Hey, little buddy. No, I don't think that was it. Apparently, parents need to learn. Most kids want to fit in far more than they want to stand out. Prince's younger sister, Taika, was born in 1960. Both siblings developed a keen interest in music, which was encouraged by their parents. Prince was interviewed on TV back in 1970, but nobody knew who he was at the time. The city was in the middle of a teacher's strike, and some reporter shoved a mic in front of an 11-year-old boy. The 11-year-old boy said that teachers should get more money for the work that they were doing. 1975, the husband of Prince's cousin formed a band called the 94 East with Marcy Ingolstadt and Christy Lazenberry, hiring Andre Caimon and Prince to record a few tracks. The band recorded tracks which later became the album Minneapolis Genius. 1976, after graduating from Central High School, Prince made a demo tape along with producer Chris Moon in the Minneapolis studio. Just because you have talent and you can write music doesn't get you noticed. Somebody has to tap the big executive on the shoulder and tell them who you are. The demo tape made the rounds of music moguls until landing on the desk of Owen Husney, a Minneapolis businessman who signed Prince to a management contract. It also helped create another demo at Studio 80 in Minneapolis. The demo recording, along with the press kit produced by Husney's ad agency, resulted in interest from several record companies, including Warner Brothers. Prince signed a recording contract with Warner Brothers. The record company agreed to give Prince creative control for 3 albums and retain his publishing rights. The pair moved to Sausalito, California, where Prince's first album, For You, was recorded at the Plant Studios. Prince wrote, produced, arranged, composed, and played 27 instruments on the recording. He did everything except for some of the songwriting for Soft and Wet, which was co-written by Moon. The cost of recording the album was twice what Prince had been advanced. Prince used the Prince's Music Company to publish his songs. The contracts that most singer-songwriters wound up putting their names on are slanted way too far in favor of the recording studios. Young bands think if they can just sign to some big label, the world will be theirs. Not even close. Most of the profits from the record sales go to the record companies. The band has to perform at concerts where they make the money. Once their managers and agents take their cut. The contract might have stipulations in it saying that the singers have to produce so many albums over so many years. They also forbade the singers from working for any other companies using any names that are signed on the contract. The music industry is so huge and they have so much money that they are able to weld an enormous amount of power. Remember the golden rule. Going to court to sue a record company is like an ant trying to stop a speeding vehicle. Did you ever see the movie The Phantom of the Paradise? Kind of like that. Prince more than fulfilled his contract. A lot of record executives became enormously wealthy because of his hard work. Now think of just about any music group, and you'll think of some nasty things that they did. Entertainers have some of the most outlandish offstage and sometimes onstage behavior known to man. Ozzy Osbourne at the Alamo, Keith Moon and any swimming pool. Moon managed to get The Who banned from every single Holiday Inn in the world. Billy Idol spent 3 weeks in a Thailand hotel penthouse in 1989. He ignored the hotel management when he refused to vacate the room. He was forcibly removed by the military after they'd shot him with a tranquilizer dart like a tiger. I wonder if they put a collar on him, too. He was charged $149,000 by the Thailand hotel company. Some folks just don't know how to behave in public. Oh, that Ozzy Osbourne thing? Well, it wasn't what everybody thought. He was drunk in public. He didn't pee on anything. Prince was never in trouble. He was never arrested for DWI or drugs or beating the crap out of anybody. He never did anything on stage that got him arrested later on. Yes, Jim Morrison. He never got thrown out of any hotels or motels. He was never charged in order to rebuild a room at some expensive motel somewhere. Now, on occasion, he was seen hanging out at the local library reading books. They said that he had an enormous pile of library cards. Anytime he was going to be in a town for a long period of time, he'd go to the local library and check in. For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world. If you don't recognize that little deity, you must be from another planet. Mike Lindell was about to make one of his world famous commercials, and he was having his makeup done. The young lady doing the makeup said that she used to work for Prince. This got Mike to telling his favorite Prince story. Now, Mike used to run with a far scarier crowd. I am surprised he's still alive. He ran afoul of a bunch of bikers in Panama City, and he was being chased down the street when he ducked into a bar. A bar filled with black folks. And now, Mike was the only white guy in the building. Not wanting to be thrown out the door and into the arms of the bikers, Mike announced to the crowd that he knew Prince. He lived just a short ways from his Paisley Park studio. Well, the audience, not believing a word of it, decided, prove it, white boy. Somebody drug him up onto the stage and they said, sing for us. Well, Mike proceeded to belt out Purple Rain, not missing a single word, not missing a single mark. During the song, the bikers stuck their heads in the bar, but they quickly left once they'd seen that the audience had now accepted Mike as part of their group. In fact, he was asked to do 2 more encore performances. Mike managed to survive the bar and escape the bikers. Years went by, and a friend of Mike's told him that Bob Seger was going to be jamming at the Paisley Park, and he, Mike that is, could go sit in and listen. So he did. Mike Lindell arrived and was admitted by security. He sat down at a table in the back of the room, and he waited for the music to begin. This wasn't a recording session. It was just a bunch of friends sitting around playing music. Unfortunately, Bob Seger hadn't made it in that night. Well, Mike was thirsty, and he asked a young technician if he could get a beer. And the tech said, there's no alcohol on the premises. This kind of a young man was running back and forth, adjusting equipment, and once in a while he'd stand there and talk to the folks singing. Mike asked if Seger was going to come by later, to which the technician said, what, these guys aren't good enough for you? Well, Mike said that he liked Bob Seger and he liked Prince a lot more. The technician said, you like Prince? So Mike told him the story about running from the bikers and winding up singing Purple Rain to all of this black nightclub. The technician was impressed that Mike knew so many Prince songs, plus he knew all the words to Purple Rain. He said that is a long song. After a few more minutes, Mike walked out to the parking lot, where he was then told by one of the security guards that technician he'd been talking to was in fact Prince. He had thought the young technician was just a kid. Prince was actually 3 years his senior. As Mike was relaying the story to the makeup artist, she said that Prince used to tell that story about meeting the My Pillow guy all the time. 1993, Prince announced that he was no longer going to use the name Prince, but rather he was going to go by a love symbol, which was a mashup of the gender symbols for man and woman. It was an unpronounceable symbol that didn't have a name, but that's how he was going to be identified. People were confused. Why? What is this? This is some kind of a bad joke or what? The symbol was a rebellion against Prince's record label, Warner Brothers. He had signed with the company back in 1977 when he was still just a teenager, and they had produced a lot of money for the company. After signing a new contract in 1990, Prince began to chafe under the company's rigid production schedule. He was a prolific songwriter. He wanted to release material as soon as it was ready. He had over 500 songs in his studio vault that the Warner Brothers company wouldn't allow him to release because of his contract. They were afraid that he would flood the market and dilute the musical audience. Prince said the contract at the time were onerous and burdensome. Unable to get out from under the Warner Brothers boot heel, he did the only legal thing he could. He changed his name from Prince to something else. Prince compared his contractual obligations to slavery, and he began performing with the word slave written on his cheek. He saw his own name as a part of his contractual entrapment. Warner Brothers took the name and trademarked it, and they used it as the main marketing tool to promote all the music that he wrote. Prince once said the company owns the name Prince and all related music marketed under Prince. He became merely a pawn used to produce more money for the Warner Brothers. In 2000, after the contract expired, Prince went back to using his own name again. Talk about different. Prince did not allow swearing in the studio. There was a jar set by the door for anybody letting go with an outburst, something like what I'm known to do. Yes, I don't swear on the show. It isn't because I don't swear, it's because it does nothing for the show, and some people may object. Prince is, or rather was, one of them. Not that he ever listened to the show. But if he had, I would not have to shell out any of my hard-earned cash because of my mouth. Once more, I'll refer back to Micah Hanks in his book, The Complete Guide to Maverick Podcasting. Anyone without sin, as the man said. Prince had managed to destroy his hip during his many performances. Being a celebrity, he was treated to only the best drugs to ease the pain. Having hip surgery, the thing to do is stay off your feet and let your body heal. Prince had fans. They were out there waiting for him. And so he took some pain medication and he performed. He did what his fans were expecting. The pain didn't go away, so he took just a little more pain medication and soldiered on. Without his fans, he felt he was nothing. He was no one. A little led to a little more, which eventually led to an accidental ingestion of fentanyl, which killed him. At least that's the official story. I'm pretty sure that Jimi Hendrix used drugs. They said that if there was a drug in the room, he would try and take it, not knowing what it did or what it was. His song, Purple Haze, was named after LSD. Prince didn't do that. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and he didn't do drugs. I wonder, did he make a lot of enemies at the recording studios when he did that name change thing? Or was it just bad judgment on his part when it came to dealing with pain? Some people deal with pain in different ways. They have a little damage and it kind of knocks them out, whereas other people, they grit their teeth and they just keep going. You hear about it all the time. A soldier with a broken back somehow manages to fight through a battlefield. Whereas you get some athlete, he gets a toe cramp and he has to be carried away to the emergency room. You might just ask, who could possibly want Prince dead? When he changed his name, the record sales fell to nearly nothing, causing the record companies to lose money. Who made most of the money off the record sales? Who stood to lose the most should other artists decide to try the same thing? I mean, it's not like any record executive ever thought about killing their cash cow, Phil Spector. There's a ton of money being made by the record industry, and when you're dealing with those kinds of numbers, there's going to be some dangerous activity. Maybe that pain medication had been doctored, beefed up a bit, a whole lot to take care of a problem. What makes for a good name? Is it descriptive or memorable? Should a name be so original that people remember it simply because nobody's ever heard it before? Aine was a memorable name for a very memorable young lady. I've run into some folks with names you had to wonder what the heck were their folks thinking. I was about to say the name of this one person, but he's still around, running around Laredo somewhere. Let me just say, just because a person repairs things, you don't have to call your kids after the jobs you do. No kid should go through life named after a tool. Kids usually don't want to stand out. They don't want memorable names. Names easily turned into jokes. Names that rhyme with body parts or things we do in the bathroom. Some parents should be slapped a bit when it comes to naming their kids. Keep in mind, if you give your kid a cute name, once he's older, he might give you a cute rest home. That's acute as in quick. Vessels change hands all the time, ships and such. What was a perfect name for the original owner might not set too well with the person who just bought the vessel. Many boaters and sailors insist renaming a boat will bring them bad luck. If you must change the name of a ship, you should perform a christening ceremony or renaming ceremony first to ensure good fortune. This superstition goes back a long ways. It's mentioned in the classic novel Treasure Island, where Long John Silver says, "When a ship was christened, so let her stay." Tales abound of captains renaming their ships in a moment of hubris, only to be met with tragic watery end. Legend says that when every ship is christened, its name goes into a ledger of the deep, maintained by Neptune. Renaming a ship or a boat means that you're trying to slip something past the gods, and you're going to be punished for it. Another more practical explanation is that back in the day, when most boats were used to transport cargo, each vessel had a reputation, good, bad, or otherwise, according to the name they were called. A sudden name change would render a boat, therefore its reputation, unrecognizable, and likely cause many problems for the captain and crew. Piracy tends to lead to name changes. As ships get hijacked and reused, the name is changed so it can try and slip past the authorities. Nobody has the time to stop every ship in the waters and see who they really are. There are ghost ships moving about our planet right now. They didn't die, they only changed owners in a violent way. The Bible is full of folks getting their names changed from one to another. It makes for some confusion when dealing with guys like Judas. The name was quite popular about 2,000 years ago until Judas Iscariot kind of screwed it up for everybody. Judas, not Iscariot, was another of Jesus' 12 apostles. He was also called Thaddeus and Lebbeus. Let's not make the most important book in the world easy to understand. All these name changes can get confusing. A lot of the changes in the Bible were made by God, so I guess I'm going to have to let Him make the call. It is His world after all, but it still is confusing. Today, anytime a pope is chosen, they get to pick a new name as well. Well, I have no problem with this. I guess a new position, new life, new name. As folks were arriving in the New World, many Indians decided to take on English or French names. A chief Matacom took on the name Philip, and he chose to be called a king instead of a chief. This led to the King Philip Wars, which was a nasty bit of British aggression. One of my distant relatives decided to change his last name to Sampson. His family was doing all right until that clown Andrew Jackson came along with Manifest Destiny and everything went south. A lot of the names of lakes and rivers in the Northeast are Indian names that were changed a bit so our white guy tongues could pronounce them. Back when folks were steaming across the Atlantic Ocean to try out the New World, the folks running immigration had some weird policies. Once you finished jumping through all the hoops you needed to jump through, and the paperwork was about to be signed, an immigration official would ask if the people about to become citizens wanted to change their names. You had this one golden opportunity to go from being called Schwarzenegger to Smith, or maybe from Caldwell to Ignatowski, if you so desired. I wonder how many of y'all are going to get that last reference. A lot of people thought this would be a good idea. New life in a new country with a new last name. With the stroke of a pen, an entire family could have a new last name. To add to the confusion, should you have a last name that is unpronounceable, like, oh, say, I'm just going to spell this sucker, let you figure it out. CHRZASZCZYKIEWICZ. Well, the official looking at this name on your papers might just decide to change it anyway. Once the paperwork was signed, it was official and there was no turning back. What kind of changes would this name swap lead to? Would a poor, starving family from Ireland suddenly find prosperity once their last name had been given a good scrubbing? Let's face it, nobody sailed from Europe back in those days fleeing fame and fortune. They weren't coming to America to get away from their rich inheritances. Around 1906, the folks signing all those immigration documents stopped changing people's names. Being a government bureaucracy, nobody was charged with keeping track of whose names were changed or from what. I do know a part of my family coming from Germany changed their last name, but nobody knows why they chose the name they did. One line of thought is they had met up with another immigrant family from Germany, and the two families decided to go with the same last name. As I'm trying to put together the family history, I'm learning all kinds of weird things about my past. I would like to think the folks at Ellis Island, New Orleans, and Galveston might have been enthused from above to christen the new arrivals with a name that would inspire them to strive towards greatness, maybe in a fairy tale. As folks from all over Europe began setting up their families all over the United States, many were getting used to new names as well as new lands and customs. Some names got changed for unknown reasons. In 1837, a little boy was born with the name Alois Schicklgruber. How would you like to try to squeeze that onto a government form? In 1876, Alois convinced the Austrian local authorities to acknowledge his deceased stepfather, Johann George Heidler, as his biological father. He now wanted to be known as Alois Heidler. Some bureaucrat in the back room accidentally misspelled the name as Hitler. Schicklgruber, Heidler, Hitler. Would the whole Second World War have gotten kicked off or gone the way it did had one of these names stayed in place? Would it be too much to say the names kept changing until settling on Hitler, because that was the name needed to send the world into this oblivion? Nostradamus called him Hister. Everything we see, hear, feel, or experience is made up of vibrations. Vibrations sound different, cause different outcomes. I do not believe in predestiny. This would imply that everything has already happened, is happening, and was happened. It would allow for time travel, but that's a completely different show. At the lower end of the spectrum, we find emotions like fear and anger, and grief. These are often associated with frequencies below 100 hertz. Fear is said to vibrate at 100 hertz, and grief is at about 75 hertz. These low frequency emotions are often associated with feelings of heaviness, stagnation, and being stuck. My all time least favorite name changer is UFO to UAP. Can we all just say 1984? Newspeak has arrived. Back in 1970s, the military stopped talking about bombing North Vietnam into submission. Instead, they said they were using the vertical deployment of anti-personnel devices. That sounds so much less murderous. By changing the name, they hope to change people's perception about randomly saturation of the jungles with explosive devices hoping to kill a few VC. When students were yelling, "Stop the bombing," they weren't referring to the words, they were referring to what they were doing. And speaking of changing names so people don't feel bad about what you're doing, high fructose corn syrup, which just about everybody now knows is poisonous, is now going by a new and improved name, corn sugar. Is it all just the name, or is there something evil afoot? As people are growing wise to the dangers of using just any old thing that's put into our food, the folks trying to sell us garbage have taken to changing names so we don't recognize the junk that they're trying to pass off. I walk up and down the aisles at the grocery store with my cell phone in my hand, looking up all the ingredients that I don't recognize. It takes forever to do the shopping, but boy howdy, I'm as mad as, well, here in Texas, we have HEBs. They make a lot of their own products now, and some come with a bright green check mark that tells us there are no HFCS, no hydrogenated monkey pus, no aspartame, and no chemical added that are considered dangerous to humans unless you work for the Food and Drug Administration, aka the Monsanto Recruiting Division. It was and still is done by some cultures. A kid is named after one or two of his or her ancestors, followed by a few extra last names. This was supposed to not only tell you who they were, as well as all the folks who came before, but also convey some kind of strength and courage of the folks who did things. The more last names, the more heroic the person was supposed to be, or might be, or at least is perceived to be. The ones that get numbered, they're okay. Folks like John Kirk IV. You know who came before him. You know what his dad's name was, and his grandfather's name, and his great grandfather's name. Junior, that's a bit of a down in my book. It's like you're in high school waiting to go up to the next grade level. I really hate it when people refer to their kids as baby, followed by their name. I always hear people talking about baby Jesus, but they don't like to refer to him as adult Jesus when he was telling us how we should lead our lives. They ignore that part mostly. I really hate it when people do that, though. It's not bad for the first year, but I've seen adults referring to teenagers as baby so and so. Now, Babe Ruth had a legitimate claim to his nickname. He was too young to sign his first contract, and so the other players called him Babe. Anybody that can play ball like he did, he can go by any name he wants. Sometimes people name things to alleviate some of the scariness. Say you see a huge hair-covered monster, and now you need some clean underwear. This encounter is going to wear on you. You will probably become afraid of walking in unincorporated areas. You won't want to go anywhere near the woods. If you attach a name to this thing, say you call it Momo, as in the creature seen in Missouri in 1971. It's still scary, but now you're a member of a club of people who have seen the Missouri Monster. You're no longer alone, and the creature sounds less man-eating and maybe a little more tourist attracting. A simple name change can take a nasty experience and lessen the impact. Have you ever wondered what your pets call you? Many government names are not just misleading, but out and out lies. A good example is the People's Democratic Republic of Anywhere. This equals to dictatorship. The communists love naming things democratic something or other, right up there with the people's things. The people's cesspool, the people's highway, the people's car. They hand out names with absolutely no regard for what the words actually mean. Once again, it's the golden rule. The guy with the gold makes all the rules. I hope I didn't run off too many of my listeners this time. I tend to do that. If I did, too bad. I don't do this show to attract listeners. I do this show because it's what's pounding around inside my head. If I did the show exclusively because I wanted numbers, I would probably be talking about everything that everybody else is talking about who is only interested in the numbers. It's not that kind of show. If you liked it, spread it around. Tell other people they should be listening to Strange Things with Chris James. And if you didn't like it, nobody wants to hear from you anyway. If you have a story that you'd like to see in print, send it to strangethings@arkanasa.com, and I'll put you in my next book. Till next Saturday, this is me. And I've got the wrong mouse.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.